Hey everyone, this video is going to show you how to go from turning on the OPZ all the way to chaining together some 4-bar patterns. My goal is to give you all the info I think that you'll need for maybe the first couple weeks or maybe even the first month, depending on how often you use it and how deep you want to go with it. But I think you could absolutely make full songs just using what I'm going to go over today. So this is going to be a bit of a longer video, but my hope here is that this is something that you can just basically reference for quite a while and memorize this, get faster with it, and then move on to the next one. So these might be a bit further apart, but my goal is to really share with you how I think you need to move through the OPZ, which is fast. And in order to move fast, you really need to know what you're doing. So getting started, I have just factory reset this. So I'm going to turn this on. It made that noise, which I always turn off. First thing I'm going to have you do is press this project button. It gives us a lot of important information right off the bat. This number, that's the most important part. That's the project that you're on. Next up, these are the patterns on the project, and the flashing one tells you what the synthesizer is showing. So this one's flashing, that we're on that pattern. I guess it's the same one for both of them. You'll notice that when I selected a different one, these stopped turning white. They were white before because they were queued as part of this pattern chain. I'll get into that a little bit more, but their patterns are typically red. There aren't, all the first 9 are presets. 0 has a blank space, but if we didn't know, or 0 is an empty project, but if we didn't know that, we wouldn't know if this was an empty project or if there were a pattern here because it's already flashing. So you might want to move it to the side, check that this one didn't have a red, this wasn't highlighted in red, and then move on. So we just checked that and there's nothing on there. Okay, so now that we've selected our project and the pattern we're going to affect, I'm going to press down this button that looks like a metronome. And one thing I want to note is that all of these affect things, either the entire project or the entire pattern. So you're only really going to be using these to set things up at the beginning or ending of the sequencing part. So we're kind of just getting ready here. So I hold that down. And one of the first things I want to do is turn this encoder that way, counterclockwise, because this is the metronome volume. Right now I want to talk about these encoders really briefly. They're very often, like the yellow and the red often do something similar or affect something similar. And then the green and the blue ones affect something similar. This isn't always the case, but it happens quite a bit on the OPZ. And so right now, this chooses what the metronome sounds like. So you can have a tick or you can have it counting 1 through 4 in a bunch of different languages or just a few languages. Then this is the volume of that metronome. This is the tempo, and this is the swing. So those both affect the rate at which it goes. These affect the sound of the metronome. One of the cooler things, I think, is I'd never really adjust it using the green encoder there because I just like seeing 1, 2, 0. So we're at 120 beats per minute. I can just type in whatever I want. 40 is the lowest, I believe, to 200. If I didn't want to be that precise, I could just tap here. Sorry, it's a noisy day. It's always a noisy day here. Anyway, so I just tapped there and it picked up. Okay, I was tapping at 155, so I'm actually going to just change that to 115 so that way it's not as fast. Okay, so now we've picked our project, we've picked our pattern, we've set the tempo, we're ready to start sequencing. So now we're not really going to be using these for a bit. We're going to be down here in this kind of L shape. These 5. That's going to be almost everything that you need for sequencing. Probably the most important one to start with and get really familiar with is track. You hold down track and it gives you some important information. I keep saying that. It shows you the what track you're on. That's the one that's highlighted. So if you want to change tracks, you could select which track you want, but it tells you what track you're on. It tells you what plug is selected for that track. And a plug can either be a sample or it can be an engine on the OPZ. So if I select this, I've changed now to plug whatever's in the second one. And then these are presets. We'll go into that in another video though. So for now, just know that that's how you change tracks, and that's how you pick what sound you're going to have. Next up, because this is a sample track, it's chopped this into 24 different sounds. So whatever I played last is what's loaded up here. This is the sequencer. It starts kind of on the inside of that L right on between track, and it ends all the way over here. If you look closely, you can see that there's these little, or you can even feel these little notches, and at the default speed, those are going to fall on counts 1, 2, 3, and 4. So those are steps 1, 5, 9, and 13, because this is broken up into 16th notes at this resolution. So with that in mind, I'm going to go switch to the snare track. And I'm going to put, you can pick whatever sound you want, but right now I just want to keep moving, so I'm just going to do the default. I'm going to put it on beats 2 and 4. Let's use that sound, and I'm going to have it the first, or every other 16th note for the first half of the measure. So right now we have a very simple drum track. We could add some variation here by doing a little bit of arranging. So I just want to show you kind of how you would use this as a very a good percussion sequencer just from day one. So I'm going to press mixer, which looks like a bunch of levels right there, and every track that's highlighted or that has a white light is going to be playing audio and MIDI. Anything that's, if you press shift and you select it, it'll turn red. That means it'll play MIDI, and it'll also have sends, but it will not play the internal engine for that track. But the important thing here is by pressing these, we can mute the kick, we can mute the snare, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to mute the hi-hat and the snare. Then I'm going to press this 2. So these are different mute groups. For 2, I'm going to mute the hi-hat. So now we have 3 different mute groups on one pattern. And you can't sequence these, but we can arrange from this by holding project. If you hit shift, it's going to turn yellow. There's a couple other things you can copy, so make sure that the pattern's yellow. And wherever I press next, whatever pattern slot, it's going to go there. So I'm going to put it in those 2 spots. I'm going to let go now. Going to go back to the mixer. Okay, I want number 1. I want mute group 1 selected for this pattern. I'm going to hit project, second pattern, mute group 2, project, third pattern, mixer, mute group 3. So now we have 3 different patterns with those different mute groups, because you can't sequence them. I'm going to create a chain here by pressing play, and then pressing the order that I want the pattern to play in. And you can press one more than once. So I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 3. I'm going to save this by pressing any of those white keys. So now, if I wanted to change this or edit this pattern, I could go right back to that chain that we had before by holding down project and hitting that. So hopefully that makes sense. I'm going to press play and then bring up the project page again, so that way we can watch it progress through the patterns. So this is playing, because we asked it to play twice there. Cool. So we have just a little 4-bar loop, and you could, fill up a good amount of space and make quite a bit of a good portion of a beat or a lot of different rhythms just using these techniques. But now we are going to move on to synth tracks. So these are the drum tracks, these are the synth tracks. If I hold track, I'm going to select this one. All the drum tracks I think that they're basically identical. They all function the exact same. All of these are different. These 4 have dramatically different functions, and I'll be covering them probably each in their own video, but they have different polyphony. It's just different than the drum tracks. I would say ignore these initially. They're really cool, but think about it. If you turn on an effects thing, you're going to want to know how to adjust the sends to the effects. You're going to want to know what the different parameters do. You're going to want to know a whole bunch of other stuff. So I'm not, you might be able to hear my cat now. So I'm not discouraging you from learning that, and I think you should explore everything, but just don't be surprised if the knobs don't initially do what you're expecting them to do. I think that maybe focus your learning time rather than your experimenting time with this part of the instrument. So anyway, sorry for that long tangent there. We're on the lead track. This is the plug that's selected, and it doesn't look like there's a preset that's selected. I've talked before about how after you press one of these notes, it's going to add that to whatever step you want. You can also hold whichever step you want to sequence to and press the individual notes you want on that step. So there's polyphony of, I believe, 3, maybe 4 on this track, so that's why I was able to do that. If I hit play, great, right? But what if I hit, oops, I make this mistake. What happened was it started to play through that pattern chain that I had just loaded, and I just want to stay on this first pattern. So if I go here, oops, that defeats the purpose. Okay, so here's what I'm going to show you. I'm going to add that again, because again, I have a point to make. So if you press down and put this into any of the steps, it's going to only put the last note that I pressed. So what I'll have to do is hold down this step until it sounds, or you just see the parameters flash, those lights on the parameter flash. I guess I didn't do that second time. But now whatever step I go to, it's going to place that that chord, the whole chord, all the notes. Okay, so you might not like this. You might want to shift the octave. Easy way to do that, shift and plus or minus. If you do it without shift, it's going to tell you what octave the keyboard currently is in, and then any notes that you add will be in that octave. So that's actually it's a bit low, but hopefully you get the idea of what I'm saying here. Another thing you might notice is that you can pick a different preset, and these are all presets under that same plug. You can randomize it by holding down track and pressing record. And you can get a lot of different sounds out of any of these plugs by just doing that. You can also switch plugs. Oops, let's do something that's polyphony. Good enough. Okay, so you might be thinking, this is only one measure. This is a 1-bar loop. This isn't that easy to be creative with. So it's easy to solve that. Hold down track and shift. Oops. And ignore these for now. This tells me how long each step is. And right now, just think of it this way. 1 is a 1-bar loop or 1-measure loop, 4-measure loop, 8-measure loop. The whole pattern in the pattern chain is going to take up as long as the longest single track does. So if you only want to program in, say, 4-bar loops, but you want it to last for 8 bars, you could pattern chain it, or you could just go over to, I like to use the lighting track because I do not own a lighting rig, and I'll bet you don't either. Hit track and shift, and then I'm going to adjust it to make this the longest track, so that way the pattern now lasts a full 8 bars. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, I just changed it back to 4, and now I'm still holding down track with this weird grip. Sorry, everybody. And now I'm on the lead track again. So I'm going to go where we've now changed it, so that way it's not just 1 measure. But this isn't lasting long enough. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to hold that step, and it's going to show, and I'm going to be able to adjust the note length. One more thing I want to show you here. So if I don't know why it's so blurry. One more thing I want to show you is if I hold this step, I can adjust the timing. If I hold this step, I can adjust the timing by pressing plus or minus. I'm just going to press minus. You could do it up to 12 times. So minus takes it to the step before it, and that's why that's flashing purple. And I did it 12 times. That's the most I could do. So that means it's going to be halfway between this step and the step that's purple. Because we know that each step is a quarter note, it's going to come in on the 8th note. It's going to be an 8th note early here, so it's going to come in on the and. I think that did what I said it would. Anyway, I think that's absolutely everything I was going to go over. So with all this, hopefully this gives you kind of a roadmap to figuring out how to go from when you first get it to learning what you need to learn to be able to make a 4 or 8 bar loop and a pattern chain without even thinking about it. So I think that I'm just going to do a series like this, but there's probably going to be a lot more time between videos because I want to cover something specific and just cover a lot of ground in each. Just, I don't know, hopefully give you lessons that you can keep returning to and use as a reference in the future. Let me know what you think, and thanks for watching.